everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about how you can get better at multiple choice. If you're here now, you're probably realizing that multiple choice are harder than they used to be or harder than they should be. And that is okay because there are various ways that you can improve how you do in multiple choice tests. I have 5 tips for you today of how you can improve on your multiple choice. And what we're going to be doing is I will be explaining each of these 5 tips, and then I'm going to be going on a random trivia site and trying a quiz that hopefully is not too long using these tips specifically, and I'll walk you through how I'm answering each question. And in there, I might be throwing in some extra tips that I didn't think to include before, but I will be including that then, so definitely stick around for those bonuses. And then I will also be randomly picking A, B, C, or D to see how randomly selecting options compares to using these techniques. And it's important to note that I will not know anything about this random trivia quiz beforehand, and I will be choosing a topic that I know nothing about. So I will be using my common sense and these tips, but that's it. And so we'll really get a good idea of whether or not these tips work. Again, I do ask that if you enjoy this video or you find it helpful, if you could like, share, or subscribe to my channel, that would really be helpful. I think without further ado, we can get started and we can get learning about how to be better at multiple choice. Alright, so my first tip for you today is to skip the questions that you are unsure of. This is something that I do for every single multiple choice test that I write. I usually go through the test multiple times. My very first time going through the test, I look at the question. If I know the answer right away, then I do bubble in my answer and I move on to the next one. If I am unsure of the answer at all, I skip it and I keep moving forward. I circle it to know that I have to go back to it, but that's it. And I do this for a couple of reasons. I really like to get a good estimation of the worst possible mark that I could get on a test, just so I don't have higher expectations than I should. And this allows me to count all the questions that I have circled, deduct that from the total, and then that is the worst mark I could possibly have, given that the questions that I answered on the first time around are ones I am 100% sure of. The second reason I do this is if I'm unsure of an answer, often, but not always, there are hints to that answer throughout the duration of the test. So that can really help you with those questions you were unsure of, but you can also be reminded of the answer that you did already know, but that you temporarily were blanking on. So it can actually be very helpful to just skip questions that you're unsure of and go back to them at a later time. I recommend it. The second tip is to eliminate any outliers in the answer options. More often than not, university profs are trying to make their multiple choice questions hard. So one way they're able to do that is make very similar answer options. This is a very common technique seen in all universities. And so what this means is if A, B, and C are pretty similar and they mean the same thing, but D means something completely different, then you can almost get rid of D because they're not going to make one option stand out and have that be the right option. So that is why I say that you can probably get rid of that outlier that is opposite in meaning or very different than the others. This is extremely true for ordering questions. So I don't know if you've ever seen them before, but sometimes with complex processes, profs will list out the various steps in a process and then get you to number them. So each option, A, B, C, and D, is ordering of those steps 1 through 4 in different orders. What I have found over the years is that you can usually go through the ordering process, see that some options are more common than others. So for example, maybe 3 options start with step number 2. Then you can get rid of the option that doesn't. And then maybe they all end with step number 4 or 1 or 3, it doesn't matter. But you can see similarities and then get rid of the outlier every single time. And then usually you're down to 2 options that are just differing in the ordering of 2 steps. So now even if you were to just guess, your probability of getting it right has actually doubled. So it went from being 25% if there were 4 options, now 50% with 2 options. So those are much better odds of getting it right. And so I definitely recommend paying attention to similarities and differences and finding a way to eliminate outliers. outliers. The third tip is actually something that came from a University of Waterloo prof. And it is that if you are completely guessing, just choose the longest answer. And this is definitely if one is considerably longer than the others, and that is because correct answers have to be undisputably correct, which often just takes more words to explain. And then for the wrong answers, they don't try as hard to write. And so this is really only to be used if you have no idea and you cannot make an educated guess. You're just trying to guess the best that you can. Just pick the longest answer. Obviously, only if they differ considerably. If it's one word longer, please do not use this tip. My fourth tip actually comes from William Poundstone's research. Poundstone found that if none of the above or all of the above is an option, then it is the correct one over 50% of the time. And so that means if you are picking from 4 options, but one of them is none of the above, you should choose that one, even if it feels very, very wrong. Same thing goes for all of the above. For whatever reason, profs tend to include that as an option when it is the correct answer, at least more than half of the time. So again, if you're trying to make a blind guess, that is probably a good option. My fifth tip is something that can really help you catch your mistakes, which is that at the end of every page, double check your answers. Everybody knows that you should check your test at the end of writing it, but the problem with that is that I have sometimes written over 200 question tests, and so it can become very overwhelming and tiring to go through the test all over again. So I do find that I usually either skip that step entirely because I'm exhausted after writing that test, or I really rush it and skim over everything when I should be paying more attention. So a really easy way that you can avoid doing this, that after every page you just check those questions. So now you're only checking 10 to 15 questions per page. At least then you know that you have double checked your test by the time that you finished it. All right, so we just finished all of those tips. I think now what we can do is go onto that trivia website and see if these tips work. So I did pick a quiz on outer space because I have never taken an outer space course. I know very general information like we are on planet Earth. There are other planets. I couldn't even tell you how many accurately. I believe we're in the Milky Way. I don't know. I could be very wrong. I know nothing about space. So that is the point of this quiz. I just want to be using the tips that I just shared to see if I can get a better score than picking randomly. So, question number 1. It says, what are red giants, white dwarves, supergiants, and middleweights? Okay, so looking at my options here, the first one, A, world-class wrestlers, is just wrong. And then what you can see right away is options B and C are very similar. It says either stars in various stages of evolution or planets in various stages of evolution. So I think it's going to be one of the two. So now I'm down to 50%. It's now a question of whether or not I think red giants, white dwarves, and supergiants are stars or planets, and I am going to say that they are stars, just because. Now, stars last forever. True or false? And this is something I actually didn't get into in the video, but along with Poundstone's other research that I did mention, he did also say that when you are looking at true and false questions, true is more commonly the correct answer than false for whatever reason. So if you have no idea, pick true. The closest star to the Earth is, and then a whole bunch of options. I really don't know for this one. I think it's probably the North Star or the Sun, and I'm literally just saying that because I am more familiar with those, which is also another tip. If you have studied material and one option seems more familiar to you, it's probably because you have seen it while you were studying. I have not studied this information, so I shouldn't really go with familiarity. However, another Poundstone tip is that B is actually more favored when it comes to A, B, C, and D, and C is actually the least favored, which is actually kind of funny because that's not what most people say. Most people say pick C, but the research says to actually pick B. So I think that's just what I'm going to do because I don't know. Number 4, the temperature of a star's surface is determined by, okay, so I'm gonna go for my longest answer tip. So that means I should be picking number C here because it is by far the longest option, which is the rate at which hydrogen is being converted to helium, which also makes sense to me. So I don't think that's a bad guess. Number 5, it says that which of the following stars is the hottest? And then it has 3 stars that I've never heard of before. However, it does have the colors, and I do have a little bit of common sense, the color of flame based on its heat. And I do think that white is the hottest, so I'm just going to pick the white star here, which is Sirius. Number 6, it says a meteor is, and then some options. Right away, I can see that B and C are very similar. So it's either A or B. Just because I have a basis of what a meteor is, I'm gonna choose B, but I'm not sure about that one. Number 7, it says that a comet is blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's the exact same options as before. So it's probably the other one that I didn't pick. So I'm going to choose now that a comet is a cloud of dust or gases. 8, it says that the sun is about 4.5 billion years old. How many years before it is expected that the sun will fizzle out, resulting in a total destruction of Earth? Wow, I didn't know that was going to happen. The fact that I don't know that this is a thing means it's not 5 years. It's probably not 500. 5,000 still seems very soon, and I think I would know about it. So I think I'm going between 5 billion and 5 million years ago. Because I don't know, I'm gonna pick B, because of that rule that B is sometimes more right than others. Number 9, how often does Halley's Comet return? Okay, so now this is another tip that I didn't share in the video. When it's a question similar to the one we just did, number 8 or number 9, where it is kind of like a timeline of events or there's various numbers, try not to go on the biggest or smallest or even middle number. I try and go on the other options based on whether or not I think it's at the beginning of the timeline or the end. That's really how I make my decisions on these types of questions. I wouldn't be picking 10 or 92. I'd be picking somewhere between this 27 and 76. I think I'm gonna pick 58, which I know I said I wouldn't do the middle, but just because 27 seems too close to 10 and 76 seems too close to 92, I'm gonna go for the 58, but it is a complete guess. And so now for the final question of the test, it says, who put the first telescope to practical use? I'm going to say not the third one because I've never heard of probably him. Socrates, I do think of as a philosopher, so I'm not going to pick him. I do think of Galileo as an astronomer, so that is the one I'm going to pick. And we're gonna see the score of my test. So it looks like I got 60%, which is a passing grade, which I'm actually very happy with, given that I truly did not know the answers to any of these. I'm proud that my tips do seem to work, but I will double check by randomly selecting options here and see what that gives me, and we'll compare the two. Okay, I randomly selected some options and I got 4 out of 10 when I randomly selected. And so that means I just boosted my grade by 20% using the tips that I had provided for you. So I think that is actually very good proof that those tips do work. So definitely take these tips with you to your next multiple choice test, practice them, and hopefully they really help you out. That wraps up my video on how to get better at multiple choice, and I hope you learned a bit today, and I hope that you are able to boost your grade on your next exam or midterm or whatever you have coming up, because though marks are not everything, they definitely encourage you to continue with your education, which is the most important part. You can graduate, you can do it, and hopefully these tips will help you do so. And check out my video on how to learn better, because that can also definitely help you with your studies and improving your grades if that's what you're trying to do at the moment. Thanks for sticking around and thanks for checking out my channel. It really means a lot to me, and I hope to see you soon.